Can a soul truly exist within a world of cold data and metallic surfaces? We explore the deep, pulsing emotions that survive even in the most high-tech landscapes of the future. Click subscribe now and witness the beautiful collision of humanity and technology today. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I almost didn't look at it. I had a routine on Sunday mornings: coffee, the crossword, maybe a slow walk before my sister called to remind me about brunch. I was already planning what to wear. Something comfortable, something easy. Then I saw the name on the screen. It was Daniel, my attorney. Daniel had been my family's lawyer for 11 years. He handled my father's estate after the accident, helped my mother refinance the house, drafted the business succession documents when my parents decided to retire early, and hand Meadow and Fig, our family's catering company, over to me and my younger sister, Diane. Daniel did not text on Sundays. Daniel barely texted at all. He was a phone call person, a sit-across-the-table person, a slide-the-folder-across-the-desk person. The message said 4 words: "Do not go anywhere." I stared at it. Then a second message came through before I could even process the first. "I need you to call me right now, not later. Now. Do not talk to Diane before you call me." My coffee went cold on the counter. I didn't notice for a long time. I'd been managing Meadow and Fig for 3 years by then. My parents had built it from a folding table at a local farmer's market into a full-service catering operation: corporate events, weddings, private dinners, the kind of clients who called a year in advance and sent handwritten thank you notes afterward. When my mother's health started declining and my father's knees made it impossible for him to stand through a 6-hour wedding reception, they sat us both down and told us they were ready to step back. Diane and I were equal partners on paper, 50-50. I handled operations, the staff, the scheduling, the vendor contracts, the kitchen. Diane handled the client-side proposals, tastings, the social media presence she had built from scratch and was genuinely proud of. It worked because we trusted each other. Or I thought it worked. Or I thought I knew what trust meant when it came to my sister. My mother died 8 months before that Sunday morning. She had been sick for 2 years, but the last 4 months went fast in the way that those months always seem to. In retrospect, like the days were moving at normal speed, and then suddenly you look up and there are machines and hushed voices and a room that smells like antiseptic, and everyone is saying things that are meant to be comforting, but none of it lands. My father had passed 3 years earlier, a sudden cardiac event that gave us no time to prepare, no time to say anything. My mother's death was slower, and in some ways that made it heavier. I had more time to dread it and more time to feel guilty for dreading it. After the funeral, I threw myself into the business. It was the only thing that made sense. I had staff who depended on their paychecks. I had events booked through the following spring. I had a walk-in refrigerator that needed a new compressor and a linen supplier who kept sending the wrong shade of ivory, and a head chef who was threatening to leave if we didn't renegotiate his contract by the end of the 40th month. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't stop the refrigerator from breaking. Diane grieved differently. She took 2 weeks off entirely, which I understood. She said she needed space, which I understood. She started coming into the office less, which I told myself I understood, even when I had to cover her client calls and reschedule her tastings and answer her emails because she had the kind of warm, personal relationship with our clients that I didn't want to disrupt by having them suddenly hear from me instead of her. I told myself she was still healing. I told myself I was being a good sister. I told myself a lot of things. I called Daniel from my car, sitting in the driveway, still in the clothes I'd slept in. He answered before the second ring. "Rachel," he said, "thank you for calling immediately. I need you to listen carefully, and I need you to not panic." When someone tells you not to panic, your body begins panicking immediately and automatically, without your permission. "What happened?" I said. "I received a document package last Thursday," he said, "sent to my office by courier. I've spent the last 2 days verifying what I'm looking at before I called you, because I wanted to be certain." "Daniel, what is it?" He was quiet for exactly 1 second. Someone filed an amendment to the Meadow and Fig operating agreement. It was submitted to the State Business Registry 4 weeks ago. The amendment restructures the ownership split. It transfers 60% of the company to Diane and reduces your share to 40%. It removes your title as managing partner and reclassifies you as a non-voting operational director. I heard the words. I understood each one individually. "That can't be right," I said. "An amendment to the operating agreement requires both signatures, my signature and Diane's." "Yes," Daniel said. "It does. I didn't sign anything." Another pause. "Careful. Measured. Rachel, the document has your signature on it." The street in front of my house looked exactly the same as it always did. A neighbor's sprinklers were running. Someone 3 houses down was washing their car. The world was completely ordinary, and I was sitting in my driveway being told that my signature existed on a document I had never seen. "That's not possible," I said, and even as I said it, something shifted in my stomach. A cold, slow recognition of something I didn't want to recognize yet. "Do you remember?" Daniel said carefully. "Signing anything related to the business in the weeks following your mother's funeral? Anything at all, even something that seemed routine?" I closed my eyes. There had been so many papers in those weeks. Insurance documents, estate paperwork from my mother's will, vendor renewals I'd been putting off, a stack of forms from our commercial insurance broker that my assistant had flagged as time-sensitive. I had signed things at the kitchen table with a glass of wine beside me. I had signed things in the parking lot of the funeral home with a pen borrowed from a stranger. I had signed things I'd only half read because I had a eulogy to finalize and a reception to plan, and a head chef whose contract still needed renegotiating. I had signed things I trusted were what they appeared to be. "There was a packet," I said slowly, "from our accountant. At least I thought it was from our accountant. Diane brought it to me about 2 weeks after the funeral. She said it was year-end tax authorization forms. She said Kevin had sent them and that they were time-sensitive." I heard Daniel exhale very quietly. "Kevin hasn't filed anything with your office in 6 months," he said. I called him Friday. "He didn't send a packet in November." I sat in my car for a long time after that call ended. The brunch I was supposed to attend was at Diane's house. She had texted me that morning, "Can't wait to see you. Made your favorite scones." And I had responded with a little heart emoji, like a person who had no idea that her sister had spent the last month restructuring a 30-year-old family business around a forged document, slipped into a grief-fogged stack of papers. I didn't go to brunch. I told her something came up with the restaurant. She sent back a sad face and said we'd reschedule. I went to Daniel's office instead. He had the documents spread across his conference table when I arrived. I stood over them for a long time. The signature at the bottom of the amendment looked like mine. It had the same slight leftward lean, the same loop on the R, the same way I've always written the C in Crawford, my last name, the name on the business, the name my parents gave both of us. But I had not signed it. "Can we prove it?" I asked. "Potentially," Daniel said. "Forensic document analysis can detect inconsistencies in ink pressure, pen angle, the way the signature was formed relative to a baseline sample. It's not fast and it's not cheap. But more importantly, he opened a second folder. The document was notarized. The notary stamp belongs to a woman named Patricia Holt. I ran her license number. She's a licensed notary in the state. She's also Diane's husband's cousin." I looked at him. "Thomas's cousin," I said. "Yes, Thomas, my brother-in-law. Quiet, careful Thomas, who always refilled your water glass at dinner before you noticed it was empty, who remembered everyone's allergies, who had never once in 6 years of family gatherings made me feel even slightly uncomfortable. Thomas, who worked in commercial real estate and understood contracts and knew exactly how documents moved through official channels. Thomas, who had been at the house the afternoon Diane brought me that packet of papers. I had offered him coffee. He had smiled and said no thank you. He was just dropping Diane off, and then he had left. Except he hadn't left right away, because I'd heard his car in the driveway for another 10 minutes while Diane sat with me at the kitchen table and watched me sign. I thought about every conversation Diane and I had shared in the months since my mother's death. The way she'd started asking careful questions about our major clients, which contracts were up for renewal, which vendors we were most dependent on. I'd thought she was finally re-engaging with the business. I'd been relieved. I thought about a Tuesday afternoon in December when I'd arrived at the office and found her going through the physical files in my office, the ones I kept locked. She said she was looking for the catering license renewal. I'd found it in 30 seconds in the filing cabinet and handed it to her and thought nothing of it. I thought about the photographs. 2 months after my mother's funeral, our cousin Marcus had hosted a small family gathering, an informal thing, a way to bring everyone together outside the context of grief, somewhere that wasn't a funeral home or my mother's house. I had not wanted to go. I went anyway because I thought it was the right thing to do and because Diane had said it would help. It did not help. I had too much wine. Not a destructive amount, but more than I usually have. And I'd laughed too loudly at something and cried in the bathroom for a while, and generally been a person who was 6 weeks out from losing her mother and showing it in the most human way possible. Diane had been there with her phone. She was always taking pictures at family things, the kind of sister who made albums, who sent prints to the grandparents, who captioned everything with something warm and slightly nostalgic. I hadn't thought anything of it. 3 days after my meeting with Daniel, I found out what she had done with those pictures. My assistant, Priya, came into my office on a Wednesday morning and closed the door, which she only did when something was wrong. "I need to show you something," she said. "And I want you to know I almost didn't, because I wasn't sure if it was my place, but I think you need to see it." She turned her phone toward me. It was a private Facebook group. The name was something innocuous. Meadow and Fig Family Updates, and the membership was small, around 40 people. Some of them were our extended family. Some of them were long-term clients. A few of them were vendors we'd worked with for years, people who knew my parents, people who had been to my mother's funeral. The group had been created by Diane 3 months ago. The posts were careful. They were never outright accusatory. They were the kind of posts that weaponize concern. I've been worried about Rachel for a while now. She hasn't been herself since we lost Mom, and it's been hard watching her struggle. I've been trying to support her, but she keeps pushing everyone away, and, most devastatingly, a series of photographs from Marcus's gathering, taken at angles that told a specific story. Me slumped in a chair with a glass of wine, eyes half closed. Me leaning heavily against a wall. A blurry shot of me gesturing too broadly in the middle of a sentence. In isolation, each image was nothing. Together, curated with that specific caption, I hate sharing this, but I'm at the point where I'm asking for advice from people who knew her before they were an argument. A carefully constructed case that I was unstable, that I was struggling in ways that affected my ability to run the business, that Diane had been quietly, lovingly trying to hold everything together while I fell apart. 40 people believed it, or at least didn't disbelieve it, because Diane was warm and credible, and she had photographs. I sat very still in my office chair for a long time. Then I called Daniel. "I need to know everything we can do," I said, "and I need to know it today." What followed was 6 weeks that I would not wish on anyone, and also 6 weeks I would go back and live again if I had to, because they clarified everything. Daniel retained a forensic document examiner named Stuart, a precise and thorough man who communicated entirely in written reports and never used an adjective unless it was strictly necessary. Stuart's analysis of the operating agreement amendment took 11 days and produced a 40-page report concluding that the signature attributed to me showed statistically significant deviations from my authenticated baseline, samples in 17 measurable categories. The signature had been traced, most likely from a document I had genuinely signed, using a light table or a digital overlay. The ink pressure was wrong. The natural hesitation points were absent. It was a good forgery, but it was a forgery. Simultaneously, Daniel submitted a formal challenge to the State Business Registry, freezing any further action on the amended operating agreement pending investigation. Then we waited. I went to work every day. I scheduled events and managed staff and tasted the new spring menu and renegotiated the head chef's contract. He stayed ultimately, which I was grateful for. I answered emails and returned client calls and made decisions about linen colors and parking logistics and dietary accommodations. I did not tell Diane what I knew. This was the hardest part. Not the legal process, not the document analysis, not even the photographs. The hardest part was sitting across from my sister at our weekly check-in meetings and talking about upcoming bookings while knowing what she had done. The hardest part was watching her perform normalcy with the same practiced ease she had apparently used to watch me sign a document that was designed to take my company from me. She was very good at it. That's the thing no one tells you about being betrayed by someone you love. You spend a lot of time afterward re-examining their fluency, their ease, the way they moved through deception without friction. It means the relationship you thought you had never existed in quite the way you thought it did, and that is a separate grief, on top of everything else. In week 4, Daniel received a call from the district attorney's office. This was because Daniel, when he filed the challenge to the business registry, had included Stuart's full report and a detailed timeline documenting the probable forgery, the notarization by Thomas's cousin, and the Facebook group. He had sent it not only to the registry, but to the State Attorney General's Business Fraud Division, because Daniel is thorough in a way that is occasionally alarming and always valuable. The Fraud Division had opened an inquiry. The inquiry had led to Thomas. Thomas, it turned out, had used his professional access to a document management platform, the kind that commercial real estate firms use to process contracts, to create a version of the operating agreement amendment that was formatted identically to the kind that agreement. Authentic state filing documents. He had done this twice before, for 2 other clients of his firm, both times for legitimate purposes, which meant he knew exactly what he was doing and exactly how to do it undetected. Except that he had made one small and specific error. He had accessed the document platform from his home IP address instead of the office network, which meant there was a log, and the log had a timestamp, and the timestamp placed him in his home office on the same evening that Diane had brought the packet of papers to my kitchen table. When the investigators contacted Patricia Holt, the notary, she cooperated immediately. She said she had never actually witnessed me sign anything. She said Diane had told her the signature was genuine and that I was just unavailable to appear in person. She said she had trusted her husband's cousin, which is a sentence that sounds painfully familiar to me, for different reasons. Diane called me on a Friday evening, 3 days before the DA filed charges. I almost didn't answer. Then I did because I wanted to hear her voice. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe some last piece of evidence that I had misunderstood something. Maybe just confirmation, so I could stop second-guessing myself the way I had been doing for 6 weeks. I've been thinking, she said, that we should revisit the ownership structure. I think the current arrangement isn't really reflecting the contribution levels anymore, and I've actually had some conversations with a business consultant who agrees. Diane, I said. She stopped. I know about the amendment, I said. I know about the notary. I know about Thomas and the document platform. I know about the Facebook group. I know about all of it. The silence on the other end of the phone was not the silence of someone who has been caught off guard. It was the silence of someone who is very quickly running calculations. Rachel, I think you're under a lot of stress. The DA is filing charges on Monday, I said. Wire fraud, forgery of a legal document, conspiracy. I wanted you to know before it happened, because despite everything, I'm not someone who wants to blindside you. I hung up. On Monday morning, at approximately 9:45, Diane posted a video to the Meadow and Fig family updates group. I know this because Priya screenshotted it in real time. It was a close-up of Diane at her kitchen table, soft light, a cup of tea visible at the edge of the frame. She was speaking quietly and with great apparent emotion about how the business had been struggling under current management, how she had been forced to take difficult steps to protect what her parents had built, how she hoped her followers would understand. She had 42 viewers when the DA's investigator and a sheriff's deputy arrived at her door. She was still live when they knocked. I did not watch the video. Priya described it to me later the way Diane had looked up, the confusion crossing her face, the camera tilting sideways as she set the phone down without ending the stream. 38 of her 42 viewers watched a live stream of the ceiling of her kitchen for 7 minutes before the phone battery died. The amended operating agreement was formally invalidated by the state business registry 6 days later. Daniel filed the paperwork the same afternoon, and by the end of the week, the Meadow and Fig operating agreement looked exactly the way my parents had written it, with one modification that Daniel and I had discussed, and that I had decided on myself. I restructured the ownership documentation to include a formal succession clause, something that explicitly and irrevocably tied the company's identity to its founding mission. A set of operational standards, protected in the company bylaws, that would require unanimous agreement from any future ownership group to change. It was a way of making permanent what my parents had built, not just the company, but the values behind it. The relationships with suppliers who'd been with us for 20 years, the staff who'd been there for 15, the commitment to doing events the way my mother had always insisted on doing them, which was carefully, honestly, and with the best possible ingredients. Thomas entered a plea agreement. Diane's case went to trial, which I did not attend because Daniel told me I didn't need to be there, and he was right. She was convicted on 2 counts of fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit forgery. The sentencing was 4 months later. I was in the parking lot of a venue in the middle of a site walkthrough for a June wedding when Daniel called to tell me. I thanked him, put my phone back in my pocket, and went back inside to measure the distance between the ceremony arch and the cocktail tables. I think about my mother sometimes, in the middle of an event. Usually at the moment when everything is running, the appetizers are circling the room, the music is right, the lighting is doing exactly what we planned for it to do, and there's that specific 20-minute window at the beginning of a reception when everyone is still arriving and the evening feels full of possibility. She loved that part. She used to stand near the kitchen entrance with a glass of sparkling water and just watch, and if you asked her what she was doing, she'd say she was making sure everything was all right. But really, she was just looking at the things she'd built. I stand in the same spot sometimes. The business has been doing well. Better than before. Honestly, the spring season was our strongest in 4 years, and we brought on 2 new corporate clients who found us through a referral from someone who had seen us at an event and spent 3 months trying to track down our contact information. We have a waiting list now for Saturday weddings, which is the kind of problem I spent years hoping we would eventually have. My staff knows something happened, in the vague way that people who work closely with someone always sense when something significant has passed. They don't ask about it, which I appreciate. Priya asks sometimes, in the careful way that Priya does everything, and I answer honestly, which is that I'm okay, and that the company is okay, and that I'm grateful every day for the people who showed up when it mattered. My sister underestimated one specific thing about me, And it wasn't my legal resources or my attorney or the forensic document examiner or any of the mechanisms that ultimately undid what she'd tried to do. It was simpler than that. She underestimated how well my mother had taught me to read a document before I signed it. She counted on grief to make me careless, and grief almost did. But my mother spent 30 years building a business on the principle that you verify what you're agreeing to, that you never let urgency override attention, that the line at the bottom of the page means something permanent, and the lesson took, even when I forgot it for one terrible afternoon at a kitchen table with a pen in my hand and a heart that was too tired to look carefully. I look carefully now, at everything. And Meadow and Fig is still exactly what my parents built it to be because some things, it turns out, are harder to take than anyone anticipates.